All right, we're going to get started with our Bible class. We are in the book of Daniel, and it was not my intention to only teach every other chapter of this book, but alas, here we are. I was told by Mike that you guys got all the way through chapter 4 last week. In chapter 4, we get another dream sequence. This one not as, praiseworthy of Nebuchadnezzar. And then at the end of the chapter, or towards the end of the chapter, we see the prophecy or the dream come true of Nebuchadnezzar being humiliated and starting to act like a beast, and then he's restored, and all of those things. And that is chapter 4. In chapter 5, we get a bit of a time jump here. It seems like in every chapter there's a bit of a time jump. It's not a just one story into the next that happens in the same day. These are happening over a large span of time during Daniel's time in Babylon. So, to set up what we are going to be discussing in chapter 5, let me ask you this. What are some things that modern people put their trust in over God? Cash? Cash money? Yep. Absolutely. That's the easy one. Let's took the easy one. We all got to think a little harder now. Jacob.
Their own planning.
Their own planning.
Yep.
This is my plan, and it's going to happen. Bill?
I was just going to say themselves.
Themselves? Shelby?
Various leaders, whether that's like the boss of a company, politicians, government in general, like people in the higher authority.
Yeah. Human leadership or institutions, absolutely. That's a big one, right? Of getting on board with the company's vision or getting wrapped up in a nation's politics. John, is that a hand or are you stretching?
It kind of both.
Both, okay.
Money, finances, wealth,
Yeah.
savings, stocks.
Yeah. Socks? Oh, I thought you said socks. I was like, if that's where you keep your money, I get, I'm not here to judge. We could go on and on and on, like all the things that people put their trust in over God. Let me ask you this: why? Why do people do that? Why do we do that? Yeah, Marissa?
Instant gratification.
Instant gratification.
You have to wait for God to answer sometimes. But if
Yeah.
you try to do things yourself, you think you got it going.
Yeah. I can either wait on God to answer this prayer, or I can just go do this thing right now. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's easy to have a distorted view of what you can control. People think they have more power over their circumstances, over what's going on around them, or their own lives than they really do.
The illusion of control. Absolutely. Because it makes us, makes us feel better, right? Of like, I'm in control of this. Yeah, I'm the one that has the power. Well, go ahead, Ruth. Yes. Yeah, tangible, physical versus the spiritual or the things in the future. Absolutely. In the ancient world, why are we talking about this? Because in the ancient world, people put just like they do today, they put their trusts in hope and faith in a lot of different things. But physical security, I don't know how many of us sit around and really think and contemplate and worry about our physical security, right? Like, are people with swords going to just barge in here and start killing people? Is Cheyenne going to be invaded by Fort Collins and we're going to have to take up arms and protect ourselves? I don't know. I don't know how many people think about those kind of things. I would bet it's not zero, right? But not many of us. You don't wake up on an average day and think, all right, well, I got to make sure that I am ready for the Fort Collins invasion, just in case. Not many of us think about that. But in the ancient world, that was a big source of worry and stress of just am I going to be safe today? Are we going to get invaded today? And that's why in ancient cities, they had walls. There's no wall that's built around the city of Cheyenne. It's just the wind that keeps people away. And we keep it blowing. In the ancient world, people built walls because walls keep people out. And in those walls, oftentimes people placed all of their hopes, their dreams, their faith, and security in the fact that they had a wall built around them. They trusted in only themselves and the wall that they could build. And it reminds me of what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 12. Therefore, let anyone thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. 2 weeks ago, we were finishing up chapter 3, and we talked about some furnaces. And so I told you that I would find you some pictures of these furnaces. And so I don't know what you had in mind of the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in a furnace that was heated 7 times hotter than what it normally was. This is what most historians think the furnace that they were talking about was. Not necessarily an apparatus that heated a building, but more of like, we would call it a kiln, right? That they built bricks basically the same way that we make bricks today. You have to heat them. And if you want a lot of bricks, you got to build a big furnace and a lot of furnaces. Did I mention the wall, right? They're about building walls. They want to feel safe. And so in order to do that, you got to make a lot of bricks and you got to have big furnaces in order to do these things. And so this is what historians think is going on here in Daniel chapter 3. Just so I promised you that I would find these pictures. And so that's what I did. Let's get into chapter 5. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4 and then try to decipher what is going on here for us. It says, King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple of Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple and the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone. We get introduced just kind of out of the blue. King Belshazzar. Well, where did this guy come from? This is not to be confused with Daniel's Babylonian name, Belteshazzar. This is Belshazzar. Right? That's pretty easy. I would liken it to, I don't know, what's an English name that's really close to another English name? It'd be like Jeff and Jeff. Right? Shelley and Shelby? Yeah, what'd you say? Yeah, well, that's Jeff, right? Do some people pronounce it Joff? That's way too pretentious, okay? You're Jeff. Get over it. So, here's the order of events. You know, how do we get from Nebuchadnezzar to this Belshazzar guy? An ancient historian by the name of Berosus gives us the following order of events. Nebuchadnezzar died after a 43-year reign. His son, Evil Merodach, ruled for only 2 years when he was assassinated by his brother-in-law, Neriglissar. Evil, that is a part of his name. You can look that up in 2 Kings 25. It's the very end of 2 Kings. That is his name. It's not just a, like, by the way, this guy's evil. His name is Evil. Evil Merodach. He was assassinated by his brother-in-law, Neriglissar. Neriglissar is mentioned in Jeremiah 39, verse 3, under the name of Nergal-Sharezer. You got that? Good. And Neriglissar ruled for 4 years when he died of a natural death. This next guy, which is Laboroso-Arkad. Okay? He was a child. This was the son of Neriglissar. He ruled for only 9 months. Historians say that this child had a kind of diminished mental capacity. He ruled for only 9 months when he was beaten to death by a gang of conspirators that was appointed or hired by Nabonidus, who was one of the gang and the would-be king. So Nabonidus takes over as the king of Babylon, and he would be the last king of Babylon. He ruled until Cyrus the Persian conquered Babylon. We got that? Belshazzar is the son of Nabonidus and is also the co-regent with him. Co-regent means that he is given basically the same title and the same honor and authority, because Nabonidus did not live in Babylon during this time while Belshazzar was here, and we see him in the story here of Daniel, but he lived in Arabia, and he left the kingdom of Babylon to his eldest son, Belshazzar. There was no historical information or mention of Belshazzar, the eldest son and co-regent of Nabonidus, until this was one of these areas that we talked about at the beginning, where skeptics point at and go, well, see here that there's no way that this can be true because it doesn't match up with history. This is what people thought for a long time, until 1854, when the cylinder, or Nabonidus cylinder, was found, and it details all of this information. This is now on display in the British Museum. According to Babylonian records, Belshazzar became co-regent in the 3rd year of Nabonidus' reign and continued in that capacity until the fall of Babylon. It is most likely that at the time of Daniel 5, Nabonidus had gone out to fight the Medo-Persian army, had already been captured at this point in chapter 5, and now the army of the Persians are surrounding the city of Babylon. Let's go back to everyone clear on that? Good. Little history lesson for us this morning. Let's go back to the text now. What is going on in this text? It is believed at this time the army is literally surrounding the city, but they have their walls. Not only that, but if you look at, here's a rendition of what the city of Babylon might have looked like. They had moats. They had a water system. The river Euphrates ran through the city. And so then they constructed a moat system with their walls. And so you would imagine you got moats, you got walls, you are fortified, you got plenty of, obviously they are drinking to excess here. They are not concerned with running out of food anytime soon. They feel safe. Sure, surround us, we'll be fine. Especially if you know anything about ancient sieges, water and food was a huge thing to be considered, but if you have a natural resource running through the middle of your city, you're going to feel pretty good. Now, Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords. He is not afraid at all about the siege that is surrounding the city. He was confident because Babylon's impressive defenses and vast supplies. These walls were 17 miles long, 22 feet thick, and 90 feet high. The outer wall was also guarded by 100 towers that were 100 feet high. The city gates were made of bronze. And so this city was secure. At least that's what Belshazzar thought. It says, bring out the golden vessels, the things that his father Nebuchadnezzar had raided from the temple. Nebuchadnezzar is not Belshazzar's direct father, but many times this is used, father is either talking about him being a relative or the sense that he is also in the position of being kings. Right, like that's how it's talked about. If you go back and read through 1st and 2nd Kings, this verbiage is used quite a lot. Of this person, acted in the ways of his fathers, even though they weren't actually their fathers. It was more about that they were in the line of succession in the kings. The scene of partying while a hostile army surrounded the city is just wild to think about, right? This just rave is going on in the city while these people are surrounding it, ready to come in and kill everybody. I mean, it's wild to think about just that amount of contrast here that's going on. And I think it reminds us of this same spirit that is in our present age. A idea of let's just bury our heads in the sand and pretend like nothing bad is happening. Let's just go along to get along. And many today have the idea that the best response to the seeming danger of the times is to forget about it and to escape to the pursuit of pleasure. If I can get drunk enough, or if I can just enjoy my life enough, then these things that are going on around me just aren't happening. And I think it also displays the foolishness of drunkenness. In Isaiah 5, verses 11 and 12, it says, "Woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may run after strong drink, who tarry late into the evening, as wine inflames them. They have lyre and harp, tambourine and flute, and wine at their feasts, and they do not regard the deeds of the Lord or see the work of his hands." Is Isaiah talking about this? Perhaps. Or in Proverbs 20, verse 1, it says, "Wine is a mocker, and strong drink a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise." Now, I personally don't believe that drinking or the act of alcohol touching your tongue is a sin. You can come after me later. And I know that I'm not alone in this belief, that the act of drinking is not a sin. But I believe that many have taken this liberty perhaps too far, and maybe way too far. As much as we can split hairs between, responsible drinking versus drunkenness, what point do you cross that line? How much should a Christian drink? 0, little, wherever you're at in there. We have an overabundance of negative examples of drinking in the Bible, and this is one of them. The fact that you never hear a story, whether in the Bible or today, that starts with someone drinking and then doing something good or honorable should tell us something. You never hear a story of, I was real drunk and then something good happens. It's always, that was stupid, or I almost died, or tragedy happens. That's how the story normally goes. And those are also the stories that we see recorded in the Bible, and this is one of them. That's the nature of drunkenness. It doesn't just lower your inhibitions, it lowers your reverence for God, and we're supposed to be living sacrifices to our Lord. Lowering reverence here is taken to the extreme. The plunder that Nebuchadnezzar got from the temple, these sacred, that's the word for it. That's the only word for it. These were sacred implements and cups and vessels. Do you think Nebuchadnezzar just ran out of dishes in the cupboard? No. He specifically said, fetch these ones, because we're going to drink out of those. We're going to defile them, desecrate them. They brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple. Belshazzar was foolish enough to not only lose all semblance of self-control at this party, but he also openly mocked God, which historically, not a good thing. Doesn't typically work out well when you take it that far. Gathering the vessels from the Jewish temple served the purpose of reminding the partiers of a previous victory. Perhaps Belshazzar thought that it was going to boost morale, right? Of, hey, this was an old conquest of ours, and we came out on top, and look how great and mighty we are. It's going to be the same. It's going to be the same thing this time. Or will it? Verses 5 through 9 of the text, it says, immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. This, of course, is where we get the proverbial, the writing on the wall, right? If you've ever said that phrase or have heard that phrase, this is where it comes from, the writing on the wall, right? It's because it literally happened. A hand, it says the fingers of a human hand. Notice that it does not say the whole hand, it's just the fingers up there writing on the wall, which the text says that Belshazzar's color changed. I think that puts it lightly, right? I mean, went from tan to just ghost white is what I'm thinking, right? Of just like, what is happening here? This is the kind of stuff that my kids like watching, these scary movies that I simply can't watch because I've read the Bible. And my mind goes to that stuff, and I'm just like, this is insane. I would be just scared out of my wits. And Belshazzar was too. He was terrified. That's the idea. He was terrified. It says that his knees knocked together. And so he brings in his wise men, the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and says, anyone that can tell me what this means will be the third ruler in the kingdom. Again, this is evidence of what we see here in the Bible, matching history, that he's talking about the hierarchy of the kingdom. Obviously, he couldn't give up his father Nabonidus' spot in the kingdom, and he surely wasn't going to give up his own spot in the kingdom, which was number 2, and so he offered number 3. You'll be the third highest in the kingdom. That's the best that he could offer. But why couldn't the men read the words? This is speculation here. Perhaps, we've seen God confuse people before? That perhaps this was just the words were there, and that they, in any other circumstance they could have read them, but God confused their sight, or he confused the words on the wall, thus requiring them to find someone that would lead Daniel into this narrative here. Or some people also speculate, as is depicted here in Rembrandt's depiction of this scene, that it was just written in Hebrew, and none of the Babylonians spoke or read Hebrew. And again, would facilitate the same purpose, right? Well, let's find a bunch of Hebrews that can read this stuff, and then Daniel gets interjected into the scene. Take that or leave it. In verses 10 through 12, it says, "The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, 'O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change.'" This is such interesting language. They're talking about his color changing. He's a chameleon here. Verse 11, "There is a man in your kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy is the spirit of the holy gods, and the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. The king Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation." When the wise men were called to explain the writing on the wall, Daniel apparently wasn't one of these wise men that were called. So, the queen just said that Nebuchadnezzar set Daniel, and we saw that in the narrative, that he set Daniel over all of these people. He was elevated, he was promoted, so why wasn't Daniel called when all of the other wise men were called? Maybe Daniel was retired at this point. Maybe when we see this oftentimes in ancient civilizations, when there's a new change in leadership. Actually, modern day civilizations too, when there's a change of leadership, they're like, well, I'm going to get my own people in here. You're this Hebrew guy. Sure, you might have done these great things. And also remember that Belshazzar is like four changeovers removed from Nebuchadnezzar. And so, having only been reigning for 3 years under the leadership and guidance of his father, he probably didn't even know who this guy was. And so, again, the queen tells Belshazzar that Daniel is here, thus showing respect for his faith and his background. Apparently, she had heard the stories. Verses 13 through 16, it says, "Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, 'You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah? I have heard of you that the Spirit of gods is in you, and that the light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show the interpretation of this matter. But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom.'" Daniel is brought in. The king is obviously, we saw that he's terrified, he's desperate here, he needs to know what is going on, and perhaps, it's like I see this in a lot of people who live very worldly lives. I see this in the lives of Christians. I see it in my life. That when you have a guilty conscience, even though you might not know what is going on, you still feel, I need to know what this is right now. Why did Belshazzar jump immediately to the fact that this was a bad message? Probably because he knew the things that he was doing was bad. He had already desecrated these implements of the temple. He had openly mocked God, neglected him, And when the hand of heaven wrote a sobering message on a wall, they cried out pretty quickly for someone who had the Spirit of God. There is a saying that there's no atheists in foxholes, right? And I think that is that kind of situation going on here with Belshazzar of like, I need to know what this says, and I know something bad has happened. I mean, they're surrounded by the Persians, and then this thing happens. Yeah, I would be like, what is going on? I need to know right now. Daniel gets brought in to interpret. Verses 17 and following. It says, Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the most high God of Nebuchadnezzar, your father, kingship and greatness and glory and majesty, and because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him, whom he would he killed, and whom he would he kept alive, whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords and wives and your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. We've seen Daniel up to this point receive several promotions and commendations from Nebuchadnezzar, and he graciously accepted them. Other times he deferred them onto his friends. And now, when given another honor or gift, he says, let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. Daniel, he's almost obstinate here, right? Of like, don't try to win me over with some rewards here, while the rest of the party, they're like, I don't know if they're trying to hide the vessels that they took from the temple so that Daniel wouldn't see them. But he obviously sees what's going on here, right? That Belshazzar really has no honor towards God. He's just trying to get himself out of a pickle. Daniel was not impressed with this successor of Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel was so harsh because Belshazzar should have known better. That's what he says, right? He said in verse 22, and you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. Seems like a pretty high standard. Even though he was not raised in a God-fearing home, we see in Romans chapter 1, it reminds us that all men know of God through creation, and so they are without excuse. He says, the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. It would be easy for Belshazzar to think that he never did anything against the God of Israel, at least nothing too bad. Granted, I mean, they're drinking out of these things, okay. And you might think that too, like it wasn't that bad, or maybe you think that about yourself, and a lot of people believe this same thing today. I'm a good person. Many people believe that there are good people out there, but for those of us who know our Scripture, we know that there are no good people. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. We're all messed up and we've all made mistakes. And so I don't know if this is the stance that Belshazzar is taking here of, like, I haven't done anything that bad. And Daniel says that God owns the very breath that you're breathing. The breath of the creature should praise the Creator. But Belshazzar blasphemed God with his breath. The ways of the creature should glorify the Creator, but Belshazzar used his ways to mock and offend God. Every creature owes something to the Creator. And here's an interesting thought as we read through this. Again, going back to this idea that Daniel just said, you should have known better. You know all of this. How much did Belshazzar really know? Obviously, he didn't know who Daniel was, this prophet and interpreter that had the gift of God. The message that was that Belshazzar should have known and should have worshipped God, but how much did he actually know? Stories maybe from parents or other wise men in the community. And yet God still held him accountable for this. If that is all the illumination that Belshazzar had, what will the men of today be held accountable for? We have far more access and information than Belshazzar did. And still the message is, if you have breath in your lungs, you owe that breath to your Creator. In verses 24 through 28, we get the interpretation. Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, mene, tekel, parsin. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Paris. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Each word stands for a short sentence. Mene signifies numeration, tekel signifies weighing, and Paris signifies division. God had Belshazzar's number and it fell short. God weighed Belshazzar and he came up light. And God would therefore divide Belshazzar's kingdom to the Medes and the Persians. Phil, did you have a comment?
But verse 24, it almost lends the idea that that hand stayed there all the time they're trying to figure out what it's saying.
Perhaps. Which would even be, even more creepy.
Yeah.
Way more creepy. Sure.
Was it Hebrew?
Yes. What Daniel says here. Paris, the singular for Parsin, sounds like the Aramaic for divided and for Persia. So it's a kind of a play on words there. That's what Daniel tells them. Says basically in short form, you're done. You've been measured, you've been weighed and found wanting, and your kingdom is going to be given and divided amongst the Medes and the Persians. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus relates that the Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon by diverting the flow of the river Euphrates into a nearby swamp. That this river that was giving them this barrier and this moat that kept them safe, once the water level was lowered, the Persians could just walk right in. That still would not have been able to enter the city because they had the bronze gates and the inner walls, but those also were left inexplicably unlocked during the invasion. This is exactly what God predicted. You can read Isaiah chapter 44, Jeremiah chapter 51. God opened the gates of the city of Babylon for Cyrus and put it in writing 200 years before it happened. Verse 29, it says, Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple, a chain of gold, and put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. He's grasping at straws, right? Like, you did it! Here's your reward! You are promoted. The promotion only lasted a couple of hours. Verse 30 and 31, that very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. They had all the warning signs, but it was simply too late. And this, too, is a very common occurrence of ignoring the warning signs. Did you know that the Titanic received multiple iceberg warnings and yet continued at full speed through iceberg-infested waters because they thought we're unsinkable? You see the name on the back of the boat? It's Titanic. Nothing's going to stop us. In Pearl Harbor, intelligence warnings and even radar detection saw some incoming planes. The radar signal was dismissed as expected U.S. aircraft. They thought that an attack against them was unlikely because they were so well fortified. After all, they had the entirety of the U.S. Navy. No way they were going to be attacked. The Space Shuttle Challenger. Engineers warned about the O-ring failure in cold temperatures. The night before the Challenger launched, temperatures dropped to 22 degrees in Florida. Concerns were overridden due to scheduling pressure. In every case, the danger wasn't hidden. It was ignored, misunderstood, or dismissed. And so the question, application here from Daniel chapter 5, besides being a warning against strong drink, besides being a creepy story about writing on the wall, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, are you more like the people who didn't see the warning, or more like the ones who saw it and ignored it? That's the story of Daniel coming into our time. Question that we all have to answer for ourselves. I hope that you are enjoying this study through the book of Daniel. I definitely am. It is so interesting to hear about these things. But the message that Daniel wrote thousands of years ago still has a message for us today. Let's pray, and then we'll be dismissed from our class this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for this time that we have to look into your word. God, help us to not only do this on occasion or on Sunday mornings. God, help us to be better students of your word. Help us to search it out. Help us to seek wise guides to take us through it. God, help us to seek knowledge and wisdom from you. God, if in the times where we see warnings given to us through your word, God, help us to not ignore them. Help us to understand that you are alive and active in the world today, and that we need to humble ourselves and obey you. God, please be with us now as we enter into a time of worship. Help us to sing out songs of praise that glorify and honor you. God, help us to be for you this morning, putting out all of the distractions and issues of our lives to give this next hour to you. God, we love you so very much, and it's in your Son's name that I pray. Amen.